Good morning. It's great to be here, and it's great to talk to you about something that's passionate to myself and my colleagues at NZPOST and Assure Quality and New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. Something we've been working on for over a year. In fact, it stretches back 2 years. And as Savi said, it is about food, it's about trust, and how the two combine, especially when you take into account the Chinese market, cross-border e-commerce, and the consumer. So the story we're going to talk about today is really the articulation of trust and how blockchain can play a part in that. But it's more about the verification process because it's extremely complex when you think of the end-to-end that needs to take the carriage of New Zealand product from the farm through the supply chain, through the regulators, cross borders, into foreign countries, and have a verification record of that on the journey. So, and in China in particular, there are some real problems with trust. I don't need to go through in the detail. It's in the news, and New Zealand companies are in the news about that as well. And let's face it, there is no trust, absolutely no trust in the food carriage in China as it stands today with the consumers, and that's a shame. So, you know, if we look at from a New Zealand perspective, as Savi said, Manuka honey. You know, this stuff to the Chinese is well, it's the champagne of honey worldwide, and it's ours. And it's liquid gold to the Chinese. They love it. And, you know, that 300, the NGO factor, that's huge to the Chinese. The higher the value, the figure, the more value that honey's worth to them. When they feed it to their kids, they love it, and they can't get enough of it. So much so that twice as much Manuka honey is sold in China than we actually produce. Yeah, go figure that. But look, you know, this is great for the New Zealand growers in one sense that, you know, the Chinese can't get enough of it. But there's value lost in the fact that, you know, do the Chinese consumer trust what they're buying is actually from New Zealand? Another example, you know, we love our wine, we're great at it. We're Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay. Every New Zealander thinks they're a wine connoisseur. In China, there's a growing desire of having wine. It's almost like going up a class and structure in their society. But, you know, and New Zealand wine in particular, anything from New Zealand they love. But they're novices. And that's where there's a breakdown. Because in that novice world, there's the opportunity for the bad boys, the bad guys to replace true wine. And, you know, as an example, now we're talking 40% of all wine sold on 11/11 was fraudulent. I have no idea where half that wine came from or what was in it, but that's a real concern for singles days, and in particular for the market and for New Zealand growers penetrating that market in China. These are the issues we as a trading nation have to overcome. But it doesn't stop there. I mean, these are real brands that you can buy in China. And, you know, actually, hands up, who's been to China in the last 12 months? Yeah, keep your hands up if you brought something that was a bit dodgy. Yeah, right. Yeah. So you've all been part of the biggest fraud in human history. $1.2 trillion a year is counterfeit goods. A lot of it comes from China, with the greatest respect. And so, you know, GDP of Australia 6 times that of New Zealand is in fraudulent goods. It's a real concern. So you can see that the trust in the Chinese consumer is next to nothing. It doesn't stop there. We've got the Daigou channel. Who's heard of the Daigou channel? Yeah, it's a critical channel for trade for most New Zealand enterprises on cross-border e-commerce. The issue with the Daigou channel is that there's no trust. There's no transparency. There's no proof of provenance. It's a great gateway to China, don't get me wrong. and it works. But in the world of trust, it's a 0 out of 10. So there's the dichotomy of how we're trading at the moment. You know, the Chinese, who's heard of this before? The double doubt. Well, the double doubt has two components with the Chinese consumer. Yeah, this is in the world of no trust. What they're buying, can they believe it is what it is? And if it is what it is, can it be relied upon? Xing Li. And, for the consumers in China, that's a real issue. They want to buy New Zealand product, but how can they trust what they buy is actually from New Zealand, especially in the world of cross-border e-commerce? And cross-border e-commerce is the biggest growth for opportunity for New Zealand companies to mitigate middlemen and deal directly to the purchaser, the consumer. So, this is the world we're operating in at the moment. This is the Kiwi challenge. How do you create that trust to the Chinese consumer? How can you make it cost effective across that complex end-to-end? And most importantly, how do you create a single source of verification across what you see there is a seamlessly ending supply chain, even as you trade to the consumer? Because you've got to think about so many partners in the journey. My good friend Ruben yesterday of IBM showed a really good slide that showed, the barriers and the regulators that are involved in the journey of food. And IBM's doing some really exciting stuff there. This is a real issue. And as a trading nation, as a food trading nation, New Zealand's got to really get its act together and understand how we can make it work for cross-border e-commerce. And that's not just an exporter's point of view, that's a government, a regulatory, and a supply chain point of view. Now, a bit about us. New Zealand story of New Zealand Post. Believe it or not, we've been part of this landscape of New Zealand since 1840, 178 years. I think we were formed at the same time as the first pub, Russell, and the first jail in Auckland. And, we were there at the foundation of the colonies of Auckland and Wellington. And what we were doing then, well, we were connecting the colonists of those days with the mother country through the movement of letters, parcels, and freight. So, 178 years later, what are we doing? We're still connecting New Zealand and our export partners to the world with letters, parcels and freight. That's probably the best future-proof strategy one could ever have. And we're still doing a good job of it. The issue being is that it's got more complex. As we've just seen that to get the story right for cross-border e-commerce to China, in particular, to conquer the fears of trust and ensure there's a proof of provenance, that's going to take something special. So to do that, New Zealand Post has been working with some exciting partners. Assure Quality. Hands up here who knows Assure Quality? Yeah. They're our food regulators. They are building food pathways to the world, and in particular China. If every country in the world had an AQ, we'd have a real problem, but luckily most don't. NZTE, everyone knows NZTE. They build coalitions to take companies on the journeys to regions they haven't done business before. So the three of us got together and said, we've got to do something about this. And how can we do it? We've got to regulate a food project, a food management expert, we've got a supply chain expert, and we've got the ability through NZT to develop the coalitions to bring the customers on the journey. And that's exactly what we've done, is that within the ecosystem of AQ, we've built a food verification platform that is not just about the food processing. It is about the journey of that food from the farm, through the processing, through the supply chain, through the regulators, through to the consumer, and a portal of complete visibility and transparency. And with that, those companies that come on the journey will receive a new world-first verification mark. So in essence, there is a QR code that goes on the journey, and that QR code is a digitized journey right through the end-to-end process. So the Chinese consumer can see at the end of their journey that the product they have received can be verified through a regulated New Zealand government-owned institution. And that's really, really important. So this has been under development for some time. And we're going to be launching it in Parliament on October the 15th. And we're going to be launching it with a group of Māori premium food producers across Manuka honey, across wine and food products. It's really exciting. These are premium producers, the best in New Zealand. And they've come together in this initiative to take New Zealand to China in a verified framework. Now let me assure you that each one of those companies has been rigorously reviewed in this new framework by Assure Quality. And each one of them has come out the other end a better business. But within that framework, they have a digitized record and journey for their food product to the Chinese consumer. It is a world first, and we should be very proud as a nation that this has happened. There's been a lot of support to get this across the line, a lot of government agency work, and a long journey because cross-border e-commerce is really something very new to our regulators as well. But it's a critical form for New Zealand exports that we've just got to conquer, and we believe we've done it. Now, where does blockchain fit into that? Blockchain to us is the single source of truth. That's what I think. That's what the team at AQ and NZTE think. So it's a critical part and component of the future proofing of our food trust framework that has been developed. And we've developed in conjunction with Centrality and TrackBack and Aaron and the teams, and you'll be meeting two of them after me, who have been critical for the foundation work of creating this blockchain pilot within our food trust framework. So another angle for blockchain from my point of view, and I'm a blockchain advocate. I've been working in this space for a couple of years on how it could eventuate into a food trust framework. The decentralisation of information is really critical. Even in a private blockchain, you've still got actors that have a significant input into that private blockchain, and they keep an eye on each other. And you can do that through what we call an automated peer review process. So blockchain works in both open and private, and what we believe is the blockchain world of food supply chain. Next is smart contracts, really important, because that connects the blockchain to the real world, to the processes that happen in a food trust framework, especially when that food trust framework is what we've developed has already been digitised. Really, really critical. And you've got to think there's a lot of complexity in there because the digitisation starts from the farm through the processing. There's an RMP of that product going to a New Zealand Post facility at the Auckland Airport, into a warehouse, association of the QR code of the product to a warehouse management system, association of the warehouse management system process to a tracking reference, And that tracking reference is a global reference because New Zealand Post is part of the Universal Postal Union, which is under United Nations. So China Post, who is our delivery partner, has exactly the same delivery process as what New Zealand has. So it's a full end-to-end digitised tracking process. And that's what these products are going to go on, and that's the blockchain pilot program that's happening. Now, I think the girls will talk a lot more about the detail of that, but what I can say is that that is a true end-to-end process, and it finishes not with the consumer seeing the visibility on a Chinese platform, which is good. The truth of provenance is the fact that the Chinese consumer can see it on a New Zealand platform under a regulator called Assure Quality, and that will be in Mandarin, and that's really, really exciting, and it's a world first. I won't go into too much of the detail, but as the slide shows is the journey of the blockchain. I think what we've got to really recognise that there's a cost to blockchain, there's a cost to verification, there's a cost to the framework, even without blockchain. The data analytics that we've been working with for Sure Quality and NZT over the past couple of years, and a lot of great work by PwC and Alibaba, has shown that the consumer is willing to pay a premium for a trusted proof of provenance framework where what they purchase is what they receive and the expectation of the quality is there. The exporters, go back to the coalition, the Hui coalition we call it, they recognise that value, so they're willing to pay a price there. I go back to Ruben's slide deck yesterday, which was excellent, and I encourage you to see the IBM slide deck. It showed where the value opportunity, or the payers we call it, would sit. And that slide deck of IBM was exactly correct. It's the exporters and the consumers. And that's what we've recognised in our framework, and that's exactly why we believe there is a premium and that they will purchase this product, because it will not be the cheapest on the market. And this is where New Zealand has to go. You think about New Zealand, we're only a small country. We think we produce a lot of food, but in reality, it probably feeds 60 million people at the most, the maximum food that we can produce. So with the demand of our food, we've got to go up the food supply chain value. I think that this government of ours is really pushing that, and we believe so in the work that we're doing within New Zealand Post, Assure Quality and NZTE. Look, I really want to thank you for today. This is a taste of the journey that New Zealand Post has been on as part of a coalition of state-owned enterprise and New Zealand government institutions. It's a coalition with exporters, premium exporters of quality New Zealand product. It's a journey that takes us into trust and proof of provenance, and for the Chinese citizen, the single source of truth. And we believe it's exciting for New Zealand because finally we can look at China, we can look at the consumer in the eyes in China and say, hey, we've got a way of getting our product to you and you can trust it 100%. Thank you.